start recording here. All right, so a view can be based on any select statement at all. And a view that might include calculation of oracle length, as you suggested, would look something like this. Select star, everything, all columns, and SDO length. And let me just remind myself real quickly. Actually,
you got a whole formula that you pasted in there.
Yeah, let me just grab that. Actually, this view right here has everything you would possibly need. So what I just did is I'm bringing up the select statement that defines this particular view. View routes validate. So just gonna copy that. Okay, what you really need to know here so, just for the moment, I'm gonna put this in here twice, and I want to simplify this thing because there's much less going on here than it looks. So all I'm doing is I'm running two functions. So this is what matters most, is that first of all, we're just looking at the SDO length, SDO geom.SDO length, and you're feeding it a geometry. And hell, it might even be the case that this dim info stuff is optional. We could even look up the documentation for this particular function. But the dim info for that is findable, and this will be relevant later, by through what's called it's the Oracle spatial metadata. Now what I'm about to show you is an important and useful sort of administrative thing to know how to do. So if we say select star from user SDO geom metadata, what we're going to get is a list of spatial metadata records that exist for the LRS user. I think if we change this.
Can I stop you for a second? You wrote that in, and then you execute just that line or something like that?
Oh, yeah, I did, by highlighting it.
Yeah, and then hitting the, Okay.
By the way, I mean, again, a detail of SQL Developer. It's if you run this guy, what you'll get is a return that's in a format like a table.
Yeah.
And if you run it this way, it's like running it in SQL Plus. You get this kind of nonsensical view of the data. But this is useful when you're actually executing a procedure or something like that. It's just sending print statements back.
Just does it, we do like an execute and access to not a select statement. You actually modifying data.
Yeah, exactly.
And let me back up even further, but you got into this little query builder. How? I didn't pick that up.
Oh, by query builder you mean SQL Developer?
No, I know how to get developer going, but then this little worksheet that you're on.
Sure.
Where did we start that?
I'm just copying this because I'm going to need it, but I think the easiest way to help is to just close all this stuff. No. So when you actually, I believe that whenever you open a connection, so I'm going to open a connection here to LRS1, and it just pops up.
Gotcha. Okay.
And at this point, it's just type SQL and run it, and it works.
Right. And then if you pick like a view or something like that, then you're actually seeing the SQL that you use to build that view.
Yeah. So here I'll pick a table. I'll just pick the TSN routes table. So this.
Yeah. So you're getting all the tabs in there now.
Yeah.
Like there's the SQL for that. There's
Yeah.
a SQL tab for that. Gotcha. All right.
But I could close it entirely too. Oh, darn it. I could close it. Now it's gone, even though I'm connected. And you can always get it back by pressing this button here. And we want a worksheet, is what we're telling, a SQL worksheet for LRS-T1 LRS. Blam.
Yeah. Okay.
If I tried to bring up a SQL worksheet for LRS-T1 HPMS, it would ask me for credentials.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get back to select star from user SDO geom metadata. So this is important for a number of reasons. First and foremost, every table that contains geometry needs to have a record in here. Needs to have a record in here if you're going to build a spatial index on that geometry. And you need to build spatial indexes on any geometry that, in the case of GeoMedia, you're going to do spatial filtering on. Like, spatial filters don't work without a spatial index. And frankly, it's just smart to have a spatial index, because things, I guarantee you, every query you run, well, every spatial query you run in geometry,
whatever,
anything will go way faster, especially with the volumes of data we're talking about with you guys. In the case of every table column that contains geometry, you obviously have to have it here, but you have to do the same thing with views. So if you create a view and that includes a spatial data column or a geometry column, you need to add a record for that in here. And what will actually happen is that the index that's applied to the column on the table, you don't have to recreate that index. That index still works when you're accessing the column through the view, but the view has to be referenced in this spatial metadata. Make sense?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. Let me give you an example just to hammer it home one last time. So TSN or routes. The routes table has a geometry column, as we all know.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And view SHS routes is really, it's nothing more than a filtered version of routes. It's
right.
And it's like the data in this view is just a subset of data in this table. And there's no extra index on the geometry column of routes, but there is an extra record of metadata.
Right.
That's all I'm trying to say. And by the way,
I get that, I think.
Okay, cool. And by the way, the SRID for everything should be 4269. I think that's consistent with the EPSG number for.
That's right. It's the NAT83.
Yeah.
Geographic. Yeah.
So that's a thing, is you want to populate the SRID properly. It's possible to store data in different coordinate systems, and this is where you would tell it to do so. But I wouldn't recommend you guys do that. I'd recommend you stick with everything in this one coordinate system.
Right.
Okay, so let's just go ahead and write a view. Let's do we were going to start with a view. Select. Let's just do this. Select star and a calculated version of geometry. So this happens to be doing that. So I'll just tell you that this dim info stuff,
Yeah.
all this mumbo jumbo that starts right here,
Yeah.
that's the same information as is stored right here in the spatial metadata. So you can always grab it from there, like select it from there if you want to. And honestly, I'm pretty sure the latest versions of Oracle don't even use it, but I don't know, maybe it's worth, I mean, we could spend some time looking at the documentation for this function, or I don't know, maybe we should.
But I kind of got that, you had figured that out at some point in time, and you keep it handy. So
yeah,
it's kind of looking like it's the domain basically of that coordinate system, the XY limits of the domain and things like that. So
that's exactly right. And if you want to learn how to use this particular function in any more detail, there you go. It's all right here.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, usually selected from the metadata view. Anyhow, but the bottom line is you're feeding it this function, you're feeding it the geometry, and you're just saying, oh, you have an opportunity to tell it the unit you want it in over here, and then I'm rounding that result to the third decimal place.
Isn't there somewhere you're telling it to do like a spherical calculation or like a 3D calculation? Did I see that somewhere?
That's inherent to the coordinate system because it's a spherical coordinate system.
But so then just changing the unit to miles.
Yeah.
Converts that from decimal degrees to miles, basically.
Yep, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah. If you don't specify the unit, given a spherical coordinate system, if you don't specify the unit, then it comes back in meters. Okay. And then you could do the math yourself to transform it to miles, but you don't have to.
Yeah.
All right, there's that. You mentioned recently in an email that you should get the same result in terms of distance calculation. If you do a spherical distance calculation, outside of Oracle Spatial. And I guess I just wanted to point out that you're right. You should, shouldn't you? The question is will you? And I've done I did some amount of formal testing in that regard really early in the SME project. I'm happy to share with you all this report that I wrote. It was something Chad asked me to do. And anyhow, the bottom line is like it changes depending on the software you're using. So that was a big part of the reason why I was really insistent when GIC was developing that these Oracle length calculations literally come from an Oracle database. And I gave them a whole workflow to do it, which I feel bad for them. It was kind of a pain in the ass because they were doing all their data work in ArcGIS, but then like at the end had to run it through Oracle Spatial to like get this calculation. but and now of course we have triggers in Oracle to keep everything consistent. But the ultimately the reason we just wanted one consistent cardinal source of calculation, and this is the formula for doing it.
Right.
And now that there's a trigger on it, it's really nice because you never have to worry about it anymore. But as we've seen in your validation routines, the reality is that I think GIC probably
managed to get a few in there.
Yeah, they made some edit after the fact or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
So okay, so there's that, and then from routes, and I'm just gonna say where, I don't know. What is it? Route county equals Del Norte.
SLO.
Yeah, I like SLO. Even though that only makes me think of slow brew, but hey. So if we run that, I made some terrible mistake. It's like stall. Oh. How about if I select star and this other column? From rows. Okay. Syntax error. Dude. Okay. Select star.
Keyword not found or expected. Is there a missing parentheses? Paren?
Oh, I hope not.
I was just looking at then, but that's your as, so or like cal unit mile.
All right, I'm gonna remove this. I'm gonna simplify real quick. Okay, just select star. Okay. Now select star and this. Oh.
Seems like you'd have a, was there one, two, three, four. Did you do this? Does that do paren matching there?
Yeah, see the blue, it's blue.
Okay, that's good.
Oh, this is gonna drive me crazy. This is not what I wanted to. Round this three as, dude, this should work. Nah. Okay, line 10, select star, comma, that. Well, how about if I do this? Let's just select record ID. All right, it was having a problem with the star. But anyhow, so I can select LRS key, geometry, aura length, and then the calculated aura length. Making sense? And let's create view VW test 1 as this bad boy here. So what we're going to do now is actually create a new view based on this select statement. And because this is DDL now, so this is no longer going to
do something in the return results.
Yeah. So I'm going to do the run script rather than run statement. Great. Test 1 created. And now if I refresh my set of views over here, you'll actually see it in the UI. There it is.
There we go.
So I can tell you this: if we connect with ArcGIS right now, we'll see this view.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see it as a layer that you can add. Well, I should amend that. If you connect with ArcGIS as the LRS user, you'll see it. You would
because no, go on.
Well, I was going to say because the view, the other users do not have privileges to see it.
So the other views that are in there do have privileges to where other people can see them. Is that correct?
Yeah. The views that are there to support user-specific workflows, like each user has access to the objects. If you consider a table an object and a view an object, and even a trigger is a type of object. So you have to grant privileges to each user has a purpose in life, a set of workflows that he's supposed to be able to accomplish. And so we just grant access to the objects that are necessary to execute on those workflows.
Right. So how might that happen? We don't have to actually execute it, but is that just another little bit of a script in here that would run?
It really, so one approach is I have a script that I've written for assigning privileges. Here we go. So I run this to grant read-only. Okay, this grants read-only privileges to everything for LRS Connect. So read-only, everything LRS Connect. So what this does, in Oracle, it's called an autonomous block. It's a set of procedural SQL that you can run, and it's looping through all of the objects that are tables or views.
Yep.
And then it's running a statement to grant. It's an execute immediate, grant select on the object to LRS Connect. So the point being to rerun this script every time it sees a table or a view. And this was sort of my kind of half automation to just get all the privileges set up. And I'm happy to send this to you so you just have it. You can use it as a tool.
That would be helpful, actually. Yeah.
I think I'm sure I've included it in various deliverables over time, but I don't think anybody was able to understand what it was for. So yeah, I basically whenever I create new objects, I wind up kind of just using this. I sniff through this and think, okay, which of these do I need to rerun to make sure that this new object has privileges assigned to it as necessary.
Picking from your menu of
yeah.
That makes sense.
And there's no problem with re-granting the same privilege, you know what I'm saying? So
right. So you can look through it all and just so then a couple of things. One is we created this and we wanted this to go to production, and I think I CC'd you, but you sent me that script for the record ID. I sent that up to Robert, and yeah, it's all getting scheduled and the script helps. So you would just basically, save this to a SQL file and, send that to Robert and say, we want to create this view. Here's the code to do it. And perhaps any of the other permissions granting stuff that would need to go in there as well.
Yeah, that's right.
And then there's some triggers. You're turning triggers off sometimes when you're doing things, turning them back on.
Yeah, well, if I'm doing any DML, like I had to in the course of the record ID stuff, I had to take data out of a column, move it to another column to save it, do some operation to the column definition, then move the data back. So I had to turn off the triggers that fire on update.
Right. Let me ask a different question too. Then, so you're working. I mean, that's a kind of a pretty simple thing that you did in a way, but it's devastating if you get it wrong.
Yep.
Right.
Yes. Right.
So what's your approach? Are you first basically going through and it's not to create a new field, junk, and then copy values to junk, that's pretty safe. But then when you're modifying and then the modification really of the original record ID is the critical thing where, if you get that wrong and you didn't copy the data over right to begin with. So are you doing that in steps, first of all? Like, let's make sure I'm getting my data into that junk field. So you run that much of it, make sure it's all there, maybe even run some other queries just to say, does this match, what's in record? Are there any records where record ID and junk don't match, stuff like that? So you're kind of taking a piecemeal approach to it, just making sure you're got your safety net out. But you could make a mistake somewhere along the line where you actually really screw something up, right? And I'm always pretty aware of that.
Yeah.
A little bit, you could make a mistake. And, you think you got it all right, and you don't. So, what's your recourse with something like that? They're like, hey, Robert, restore the database on this date or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, if you actually send something to be deployed in production and the DBAs don't catch it and it gets run and there really is a devastating issue. Yeah, I mean, it's at that point it's all about saying, oh shit, we got to go back to the backup.
And what if you're working in test though? So if for example you were doing that and you hosed the routes table. Can you just copy it right out of production then? Like, hey, there's a newer version over there. Why not just copy that thing over?
Honestly, what I before I go about, I guess maybe just I'd like to acknowledge real quickly that what we're talking about now is a different thing than making views, because views are by definition a read-only kind of thing. But okay, so let's just acknowledge that. And if I was doing, like when I did that record ID thing, the first thing I did before I wrote any SQL at all, well, I guess the first thing I did before I started working on the actual problem is I made a backup of the table right in the database.
Okay, perfect. Gotcha. And you did that just by a make table query or something like that? Yeah.
Create table routes. Usually what I do is name it routes _ 2017, that, like year, month, day. What is it, 5th?
Do that all the time, yeah.
As select star from routes.
Gotcha.
And then that's my safety valve to repopulate the routes table if I do something stupid.
Right. Perfect.
But I'm not going
to. And then to repopulate, would you just delete all the records from the original and then do an append from the backup routes? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. The command in Oracle isn't actually append; it's insert, but whatever.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Yeah, it would just be insert into routes. I don't think you even have to specify columns. You probably need to turn off triggers. Or at least want to turn off triggers. You might even want to drop indexes because that slows the populating of the data. It would be more efficient to rebuild, to disable the index or drop it and then rebuild it after you're done populating the table.
Gotcha. All right.
But okay, let's get back to the view thing. So we've created a view, and that's nice and all, but what we have not done yet is what I showed you here, right? Is the metadata thing. We still don't have a record of metadata for view test one.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're going to do is something like this. We're going to insert into user SDO geom metadata values VW test one geometry. I think we can write a little select statement here. So select dim info from any column, really. I'll just say from user SDO geom metadata, where table name equals routes. Sorry, does that make sense? This like query within a query to populate this one value?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then srid.
I actually didn't pick up where that dim info was coming from earlier, but now I see that column name. So.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
So there. This should work. Oh. What I do wrong? Column name not allowed where?
Here.
Oh, here. I see. I have to put this in single quotes because this is a actual value, not a. It's the value is a column
name.
Yeah, yeah. There. Try this again. All right. Blam. One row inserted. Don't be fooled. Even though it says one row inserted, one row has not yet been inserted. This kills me. It's funny when sometimes I go for years at a time without touching Oracle, and I'm like a Postgres guy. In Oracle, for things to actually truly happen, if you're talking about DML data manipulation, you have to commit what you've done. You have to explicitly commit. So now I say commit. Run that. Now it's there.
And that was the, what do you call it, the DDL?
DML is data manipulation language.
And so that's the second icon to the right.
Yeah.
That one.
Yeah. I get. Yeah, you could say that. Yep.
Yeah.
In my mind, I divide it up, and there's DML, which is data manipulation. That's editing data inside of tables. And then there's DDL, which is data definition language. That's just like it sounds. It's defining the tables and objects themselves. And then there's another thing that's neither of those, which is just like select statements. I'm not sure what to call that, but okay. So now if we look at select star from user SDO geom metadata again, view test one is there.
Gotcha. And prior to the commit, we would not have seen that.
That's correct. To make it even more confusing, you actually may have seen it within the context of this session, but it wouldn't be there in the context of another session connecting to the database.
Yeah.
Anyhow, the bottom line is you got to commit stuff. And there will be a whole day where you just waste the whole day saying, I swear that I ran this statement and I entered the data. Why isn't it there?
That's never happened to me, anything like that.
Yeah, I'm sure. Okay, so that's pretty much all there is to it.
Yep, and I'm looking at your other script, the update record ID. So it all makes sense. So you're doing some commits after you're doing updates.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. All right.
We could get into more detail about application metadata that's stored in the database.
But is that the GeoMedia you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, we talked about that before. So, and you have some documentation on that. So
Yeah.
I'm okay with that.
Okay.
I get the concept in my head, and I would have to go back and look at the documentation, but
yeah,
at that stage anyway.
Yeah, I guess that's the nice thing about Arc this, Arc that is it'll at least tell you that those objects are there, even if there's no SDE metadata in there.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what runs like butter without any of its own metadata is QGIS.
Say that again.
So we could connect to this database with QGIS right now, and it would just work.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't even have its own metadata layer.
I wonder,
which is awesome.
You know, if you've seen Arc Pro and their named user licensing model and everything like that, I just got to wonder if QGIS has a big growth ahead of it.
Oh, maybe
for desktop software.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was early in this project. I was trying to push QGIS as a real option for data editing.
Yeah.
And nobody seemed comfortable with it, so I just kind of dropped it.
Yeah. More and more popular, that one.
Yeah.
And then again with this named user, I mean everybody's on Esri. I'm a big Esri fan. Been using it for a long time. But this named user licensing, I mean, this could really blow the roof off of your costs. And
yep,
you can't do it.
Yeah.
We'll use this other thing.
Yeah. That works just as well. I mean, maybe they're not concerning themselves so much with desktop GIS anymore.
Right. I mean, it's a bigger. It's almost like working in Oracle, or you think of Oracle as a big database, and so that's they're kind of going after that big enterprise market.
Yeah.
But it's clearly not set up for like we got hundreds of users. Like going the name user route, it's not going to work for us.
Oh, ELAs, they sure have been pushing those a lot too.
And just the management, of these named users. Yeah, forget it.
So on the train, I'm gonna want to pause the recording if we're done with what you wanted to go over. Are we good there?
Yeah.
All right.